I am over the top excited, to say the least, to share this topic with you because organization is something that I really love doing. I know it doesn't come to a lot of persons naturally, but also I know that there's things that need to work for our homeschooling lifestyle. I've explained that we can't take someone's advice. We could, that is not homeschooling, and try to put it into our homeschooling lifestyle. But what we end up doing is bring a lot of stress on ourselves because we don't lead that life. So the reason I am over the top excited is because I did a lot of stupid things, but this is the reason I'm excited. I did a lot of right things. Why should you waste 5 or 10 years trying to figure it out? And two, there's some things that I did when the kids were younger, and I thought, well, this is going to work all the way through to the teen years and the high school years, and it just didn't. It just didn't. So I'm going to share my perspective from homeschooling for a long time, things that really worked, and why they worked, because understanding why they work really helps you to see if this will work for your family. In addition, let me just give you a little heads up too about the record keeping part of this. I added the record keeping tips here because a lot of the tips that apply for persons that homeschool in states that have more stringent record keeping are the same tips really that apply for a kid that you're preparing for middle school, or you're getting him ready for high school, him or her ready for high school. So I kept those all together here in one place because a lot of the resources overlap. So when we come to that, I'll explain about that too. But let's hop right into this organized learning spaces. I am so stoked. Okay, first, something that you need to understand from the beginning, which is why it's so important at this point, at the beginning, so that you don't create a system that is hard to maintain. It's really easier to start something, homeschooling, a journey, decluttering, organization. It really is easier to start it than it is to stay organized or to maintain it. But I am here to tell you it is every bit worth it. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to come up with a system that will work for you. A lot of you, the system I use will probably work for you. I've had a lot of trial and error during my many years of homeschooling, and I'm not just speaking from having kids that are just 10 years old. I've had from the beginning, from pre-K all the way to high school. So there's a lot of what I say that will work for you. And then a lot of what I say, you need to take tips from what I say to fit your lifestyle. But what you're trying to do is come up with a system, is what you want to do in the beginning. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, the best way for me to show you that, I felt like, was just to give you a little journey, if you will, a little story through how things develop from my learning space. Because sometimes you hear a lot of homeschoolers say you'll never use a homeschool room. And that may be true. That may be true. But here's what they never finish telling you, or they don't end that phrase with this. It really depends on the ages of your children and when you begin to homeschool. So what you have to decide is where will you do a lot of your skill subjects at, and the reason why is because the skill subjects usually require a little bit more concentrated effort, math and writing, than do your content subjects. Now, this is how I started off my journey. And what I did was I just pulled into the room this table right here that I had. And what I realized, I was in the living room prior to this time. This was a schoolroom I set up, and I put some of the posters I had on the wall. As you'll notice, this one's too high. I really didn't know a lot about child development at that time. These here couldn't see it up there, but I just put together what I had because when I was schooling in the living room, I noticed there was a lot of silliness going on. The kids almost weren't taking me serious, so I knew I had to do something to kind of corral them and get them thinking, okay, we need to begin our day. So what I did was start with what I had, which was this long table here. Well, soon I realized for this writer and teaching this next one, it wasn't appropriate for their height. They really were struggling with writing. So next, I realized one of these inexpensive tables here from IKEA really worked. And even the next one, my toddler could join us too in our schoolroom. Now, the reason I had a schoolroom, like I explained, one thing is that it taught them to a routine. Okay, we're going to go in here. We need to quit the silly, not all together, but just quit the silly because we need to pay attention to what's going on. So it really formed habits with my young kids. So here's the point. If you have young children, then it could be a positive for you to have a school area. Now, just remember this too, or have a schoolroom. Some of this we don't have a choice. We may say, oh, we wish, because we don't really have the choice in our journey. And I never always had the choice either. There was a lot of ups and downs in my journey as well. But I had this spare bedroom because the kids were small. They were basically all sleeping in one bedroom. So I had this spare bedroom to do this with. But soon I realized I had to take out that table because they needed this height to be able to do some of their crafts, and also because I was teaching them to write. If you're homeschooling and your kids have already learned to write, you may not need this setup. But more than that, more than just the schoolroom, the reason I had the schoolroom was also for me to keep my clutter, my teacher things that I needed, keep it in one spot. Just keep it in one spot. Okay, so from there, I learned then, I moved that table back here to the back for another little learning area and had this for my younger guy, but I got this kidney-shaped table here. As you can see, quickly in my first couple of years, the room changed. I also pulled in this small little cabinet for storage, for closed storage, and I got this forward-facing bookshelf because I could change out the books that I wanted them to read. I started paying attention to their reading diet and to things that I wanted them introduced to. We could go to the library and pick out books, but also I wanted them during the week when we had reading time to choose from the books that I had here. Now, this kidney-shaped table, yes, it was something I noticed that they did in public school, and it worked for me. I was able to sit here, or actually I could sit on this other side with them, but with the children around you, because I was teaching 3 at one time, I really needed more of a space. It was smaller. I needed more tabletop. I needed height appropriate because I was teaching them to write. There's no way I could teach them to write at the big dining room table where their feet couldn't even touch the ground or sit on a bunch of thick books or phone books at that time. It just wasn't working. But you see, this table here was inexpensive. It's what I started out with. And then when I had a little bit more in the budget, I went ahead and got me this kidney-shaped table. And here was the other thing. I used this for many years. That's another thing you need to think about. Okay, well, this table is X number of dollars. Well, divide that number by how many kids you have. Then divide that number by how many years you're going to use it. Is it worth the money to get that? And on top of that, starting from the beginning, I had a lot of manipulatives, toys, things I need to teach my kids. And so keeping it in one room really kept me sane, so to speak. I had to have one place to corral all of the clutter. Now, if you don't have a schoolroom, that is okay. A lot of homeschoolers they don't have a designated area like that. But I do encourage you, whatever you have, to go ahead and use one spot to contain all of your material. I've even had to school in a dining room. When we moved from different houses in different places, right here, we were in a rental until we got ready to build another place. I used these little desks here that I could fold away and bring out. They were behind the couch, and then I just brought them out when we would do science or do any kind of writing. It made it hard on teaching this one because he wasn't quite able to sit at the table yet when it come to writing. These two were tall enough at the dining room table to do some of our work. But I also had this set up here. And then we moved into another area here. And I want to explain what I did in this particular school area. I put more money into the bookshelves here. This actually was 3 separate bookshelves stacked on top of each other, and it took me a long time to find it online. I just kept looking. I can't even remember the place that I bought it online, but I absolutely loved this bookshelf. And like I said, you could stack it 3 on top of each other or just one and put one beside it, but I always wanted to go up on wall space. And then here, this was inexpensive purchase at a resale shop. And because I knew we were going to do a lot of gluing and cutting and stabbing the table and that type of thing, I didn't mind then something that was inexpensive. I put the money, what mattered most to me, which was the storage for the books. So that's what you need to think about too when it comes to your area of school. Okay, so then this is what we did. Then it morphed into another learning area. As I go along in my journey, you can see I get more specific about the learning areas, know more how to organize. And so the point I'm making with step 2 is whatever you have, this area happens to be the formal dining in my home. And whatever area you have, determine a place for your supplies and label them. Otherwise, they're all over the place. So what I did here on these binders is I took out teacher manuals that came in coil binders or however they came to me. Some of them didn't even come that way. And I stuck them in these binders and I labeled them. And I put them up here where I could get them. And then these are magazine bins here. I turned them around. They store more student information, more student worksheets, probably even another manual, magazines, whatever I didn't feel like messing with for the day, it was in these magazine bins here. And then, of course, I'd label them too. Also, I'm going to show you in a few frames about what was down here and what I used. This was this was my teacher area here. And then I'm going to show you what's on the wall that you can't see. So let me explain here as I go along. So here, what I want you to understand is that you're already an out-of-the-box thinker, okay? So what I'm trying to say is don't go, in order to save money and to find things that are out of the ordinary, don't go to strictly an office supply place. They know you're there looking for office supplies, and the prices tend to be higher. In addition, you can't really find things that will work for your learning space. So what I did, these right here are bathroom tumblers. They're supposed to be for water or whatever, toothbrush, whatever you want to hold in it, but because they were pretty, they were practical, they were plastic, it didn't matter what happened to them, but I got several of those for our markers, our pens, our pencils, rulers, and just gathered them all up. Also, I use clear containers. These are shoe boxes. And I label them. In addition, being clear, I can see what's in them as well as label them. Okay, so these are shoe boxes that I got that's supposed to store shoes. But I measured my area first. This right here is a toothbrush holder that turns scissor storage. In addition, I use different color expandable folders so my kids could put their paper away for the day. You have to have a place for them to be able to put their supplies away if you want to keep it neat and organized. And of course, they're color coded for each kid. Okay, so the other thing I did on this side is this is a garbage can. It is a clear square garbage can, but here the label I have on it is charts and reference and maps. We kept our maps, our atlases. At this time, my kids were older. I didn't need to have things on the wall anymore, so when we studied, we just got it out, we unfolded it. Here was some maps that they would use when they're studying, we're doing history or geography, some little reference sheets. I just measured this area. It was clear. I labeled it. It was perfect for map storage, these small little garbage cans. This lamp here, actually, I got inexpensive at a secondhand store, and the shade was just a white shade. I stenciled it with some orange. Of course, you don't have to do that, but I really got into it that year because I really wanted everything organized, because the way it's organized does affect the mood. And if I have to see this every day, I want it organized, at least want it cheerful looking. So I took time to go ahead and stencil this shade to match the rest of the orange and the pink theme that I had going on. Okay, here is the other wall that I said I was going to show you, and one of my best tips, because sometimes you just don't have the bookshelf space. So what do? Well, I'm telling you, a tower of drawers is one of my staples, hands down one of my best tips. And why? Because you can always go up, and with just a very small area on your wall, it takes up just a very small area. And I have each kid's tower of drawers. Not only are they labeled, but they're in order of what I expect them, how I expect them to cover the subjects, the importance of them. And so what I did first was I measured everything that needs to go into their drawers. Cords, laptops, pens, pencils, boxes. This keeps it all off of your shelf. It keeps it all in the drawer that they need. And everything is right there clear. And on top of that, these are fairly inexpensive. If they get bumped, bruised, banged, tore up, you can replace them for the year. It was just the best tip. And also being clear, again, you can see what's in each tower of drawers. So as I was explaining earlier, step 3 then is to take time to make things you use every day cheerful and pretty. You know, being able to use it is huge, huge. But that doesn't mean you have to get something just totally ugly. We can really take time to have things that are cheerful, and they don't have to cost a lot. I love secondhand stores, garage sales. You can find so many things. Also, when I shop, I don't go to the office supply place first. I go to the tool section. I go to the yard section, like where they have for potted plants. I go there to look to see if they have any vases or containers. Also in the yard section, they have those smaller tables. They have chairs that are height appropriate for kids, and they don't charge the price because they know, because it's not an office supply department or area of the store is what I'm trying to say. So like right here, let me explain about this picture. After their tower of drawers, I wanted to show you what was on top. This was their schedule. Not only did I visually, for my visual learners, show them what I wanted them to do. Remember I said organization is communicating, not keeping it in your head. It does not do any good to keep all of this in your head. You want your family to get on board. You want everybody to help you. And especially the more kids you have, the more important it is to communicate your organization. Well, my kids can't do this. Well, have you asked them? Have you communicated? Have you showed them? Have you set up a system for them to follow through? So I had both this schedule for the time where they should be at, as well as the order of the subjects for their tower of drawers. In addition, when the kids were younger, I had me an area right there while I was working with them. I labeled the days of the week because sometimes I would come across projects or sheets that I wanted them to do, and I would just stick them in the day of the week instead of putting them in my planner. It kept my planner pockets from being so thick. So I set up a section for me as well. Right here, you see I have teacher storage on the other side. This was my planner. These were some of the supplies that I kept. Again, if you'll notice, in all of my storage and supplies and tools, I try to keep the heavy furniture down to a minimal because my husband was busy working, the kids were young. If I wanted to rearrange something, it was something that me and the kids could do. Me and the kids could move books and supplies all day long. So you'll notice that I used a lot of things that were really not very heavy to move. I just invested my money in just a few big pieces that I knew that I wanted. And let me just show you one thing back up here that I forgot to mention in this picture here. This actually is a dining room piece of furniture. It was a lot less expensive looking for something small like this in the dining room section than it is going and looking at the bookshelf section. And I knew that some of my storage could be closed here. I knew I was going to have these containers to hold some of the supplies and the art. so I knew that it would be closed. It really didn't matter if this was open. And on top of that, I could keep this piece, and I still have it, and use it years later because it's so versatile. Because in the beginning, I made a few mistakes that I wanted to tell you about. In this school area here, you see this bookshelf. I took this out. This was a bookshelf that was the height of my children. And when you have young kids, sometimes you think, okay, well, you think it's going to be a longer time than what it really is, and they outgrow things like this quickly. And so one of the mistakes I made was having bookshelves that were small like this. I could have easily used the bookshelves that were on this side of the wall, keep all of the books down here for their height, and use this right here that was less and inexpensive than something like this that was more expensive that I bought at the same time I bought this table. So I still made mistakes. I wasn't thinking about homeschooling for the long term. Something inexpensive like this works. These little bins that they have, they sell these at Target and Walmart, I believe, online. So think long term when you're investing in it. Now, there's some things like this table here was right on what I did because I had young writers. They weren't writing yet. I needed for them to be able to rest their elbows on the table, not their feet dangling. I can't expect beautiful handwriting when they're crisscrossed applesauce in the floor, laying on their stomach, and all these other types of forms that they were taking. They needed an area to be able to set up because I was teaching new writers. If you're not teaching new writers, you're going to have a different setup then in your learning areas. Okay, so I would like to tell you that the teens enjoyed spending time in their room as they grew older and hit the middle years in high school, but it didn't happen that way. But of course, I have a different circumstance or may have from you. If you're homeschooling from the beginning, your teens are like being with you. You develop a very close relationship. They would come out and still work on our dining room table together as a family. Now, that didn't mean they didn't like going to their rooms. They absolutely enjoyed going to their rooms. And when they were in the middle and high school years, I bought desks that expanded and then folded into themselves. And what I mean by that is if you'll picture like a side table next to the bed, when the desk is folded into itself, it's about that size. But it has a right part or left part that expands and pulls out, and it makes a longer desk. Both of my boys enjoyed that piece. I didn't have a picture of that because, as you can expect, going through this course, I didn't really know that I was going to be teaching a course many years later. So I couldn't find a picture of that particular one. I tried to find all the pictures that I did have to show you the learning areas, but they enjoyed that. And I wanted to explain what that was. So it really was like the size of a side table, a nightstand, if you will, next to the bed, about that size, that was square, and then you just pulled it out and it made a longer desk. They enjoyed that. They also enjoyed another setup we had in another place I lived in, and that was kind of like a big square craft table, if you will. That's what it was, a craft table, but my boys set up on bar stools. And the reason they liked that setup is because the craft table had a huge tabletop. They really didn't need a lot of the storage because they were storing books in their room, but they needed the tabletop because they had laptops and the high school books are big and thick, and they enjoyed that. And then, of course, the dining room table works just fine. So they would come together and be able to spend time with us and enjoyed being together to do that. Okay, now here we come full circle. I have to show you this. Here's Munchkin. I'm mentoring him right now. We're back at pre-K, and this is her first child, so I am helping her homeschool him. I've been teaching him to read right now, and this is the area that we have set up right now in her home. And of course, when he comes to my home, we're at the table too and in the floor. But I helped her go to a secondhand store. This is the most precious drop leaf table. And you see his feet are already touching the floor. We're ready for pre-K, kindergarten, and even up to first grade. This can take him for writing. If we do crafts, he can use it for that too. Both of the leaves go up. This, like I said, this is just a secondhand store. It is an absolutely perfect setup in just a corner of her house. the supplies here in the basket. She's got the rest of them in the closet, and then here on the table for him to start with pre-K and kindergarten and on into first grade. We're absolutely set up for it. This table, of course, being drop leaf, it pushes back against the wall. So again, these secondhand places are terrific places to go and find. It didn't cost a lot, but we're going to get several years use out of it. Matter of fact, between you and I, it only costs $50. Such a great deal. And we're going to be able to use it probably at least 3 years. And it's perfect. And then as he grows, he'll probably move into the dining room table because her home is small and she doesn't have another bedroom for a school area. And this is just her first. Okay, let's switch gears now and talk a little bit about record keeping for those states that require record keeping, and for when you get to the older grades, and what do you have to keep and not keep and those types of things. And so what I basically did was I just took care of everything that they had and just saved it and put it in the binder. Also, what I did was I just basically journaled each day. I would just open up my computer, I'd get into Word, the Word program by Microsoft, and I just would type. You can type in Google Documents. There's so many things you can do. I just typed with my first one because I wasn't sure what I need to keep for the high school years. And then for those states that require the portfolios, here's what you have to remember too. For the evaluation, what's the purpose? Most of the time, they just want to see that you're doing it and that you're making progress. And it's not really, a lot of moms in these states get real nervous. I've helped so many of them through the years. Even though Texas doesn't require reporting or evaluation or anything like that, I have helped hundreds and hundreds of moms on these states that did have this evaluation. And these are the 3 things that I've really narrowed it down to. They just want to see a child's making progress. They just want to see some work's being done, and it's not really your evaluation as a teacher. And then the second thing is really deciding a system. And you don't have to do that before you do the evaluation. Just keep it in a box, a folder, or something, and then you can decide how do you want to do it. There's even large manila folders. Some people are very official. Some have binders, accordions. Some do a PowerPoint, Google Docs online. And then there's a list of items here of things that you want to take with you. What it is just a sample of the work, a sample of the work. And what I started doing when the kids were younger, because I always worried about the homeschool laws, and I overly worried about them because I thought they surely were going to change while I was homeschooling, never mind the fact that for many, many years and thousands of homeschoolers before me, the law never changed, but I worried about it in the beginning. So each year, starting about 2 years old, I kept their work in each one of these. Each kid had a different color binder. These are expandable, and I was able to keep their work and then place them then in a tote for each year. One of those big Rubbermaid totes or storage boxes is how I stored it. Okay. So the same type of samples that you want to keep for states that require record keeping are the same things you want to look at for when it comes to a teen. Look at things like math worksheets, maps, charts. You can even print recipes, photos of them doing science activities, their science journal where they question things, book reports, even a checklist of the skills that you want your kids to master, a list of outside activities. Don't forget awards, certificates, writing samples. You want something that shows the progress, something at the beginning, this is how they were writing, here's something in the middle, and here's something at the end of the year. That's all they want to see, is that it was just kind of spread throughout the year. There was some kind of pace, some kind of progress that was made. Now, this would not apply if it was high school, the beginning, the middle, and the end. This is only for those states that require a portfolio. But these lists that I have here are things that you can keep for high school. Now, this page here is more for my middle and high school moms, what they want to keep. I narrowed it down to 10 things, so not to overwhelm, but also what I did here was I showed you how I set up my team. This says pending high school and college deadlines. These were things they need to keep up with. I was explaining to you in one of my other workshops that I have a son that is naturally organized and liked a system and another one who doesn't. And so we have to help the ones who are not to come up with a system, an easy system, not something complicated, not over planning, not something overly complicated. This worked for him. It was a visual. I had the days of the week. When he wanted to remember something, he would stick it in here or something else he had to do, and he would just check this. It was right there in our learning area. He didn't really want to keep a student planner. He said he couldn't remember what he was supposed to write down, but when he had something like this, he could write it down, stick it in here, and it would work for him. Now, as an adult, he's also morphed into liking his phone more for lists, where my other son that's an adult is more of a paper and pen person. He likes a planner. So I'm just letting you know how they morphed now into adults. So this worked for him for a visual. Well, now that he has a phone, he enjoys keeping his reminders on his phone. And then I have another son who doesn't. He likes a paper planner. And I have another son who does like list on his phone. So each one is different. The point is to get a system that works for each one as they get to be the middle and high school, so they can start keeping up with some of their own tracking for these deadlines. And then all I did was kept a daily log. It wasn't any more complicated than taking notes. But what I did was, the reason I listed these 10 is because I felt they were important, and also because these were some of the things I did right. For example, I took the book description, the pages, the number of pages in it, and also the course titles, because what happened, these course titles end up becoming the titles or the course titles that you put on your transcript. And I realized after coming back and looking at them 4 or 5 years later, when I just looked at the book description, I didn't really understand the course title. So I had already put the course title, so all I had to do was go back and look at my notes. So in other words, it kept the work on the transcript very minimal because I had already had so many of my details on keeping each of the books and each of the things that they were doing. Also, I kept test scores. A lot of times colleges, they don't really need all of this information, but I had it all. A lot of them are just interested in test scores. And even if they do a community college, they want them just to take a basic entrance test for entering the community college, and that's it, and it's done. But I kept a list of videos. I had their research papers, certificates, even when they worked, recommendations and accommodation from employers, community service. You want to keep it all and have one spot, one manila envelope, one tote. It's not any more complicated than that. And then after a few years, you can decide what do you want to part with and what do you want to keep. So again, a lot of these things apply both to those homeschoolers who live in a state that has stringent requirements and also for high school. So I think this would really get you on the road to being able to realize what do you have to keep, how do you set up your learning spaces, how do you organize your learning spaces, and really realize that sometimes you don't need to start off like this, like I did. Sometimes we just don't have that choice to start off with a learning area. But what I do encourage you, what I want you to take away from this is whatever you have, whether you have a designated learning area or whether it's going to take place in the dining room and all over the house, even outside your learning can take place, do have an area where all of the clutter will be kept. Train your children from the beginning where to put it away. Have something for them to be able to, to put their clutter away. I know that even here, I had not explained about the color coordinated binders, and I just wanted to point that out to you. This was something else I did. Each child had a color. If one was left out, I knew immediately which child I need to call to remind him. But again, I always had systems in place to communicate to my kids to put it away. Take the time to do that before you start school. When you do that, it reduces the clutter, it reduces the overwhelm. At the same time, you're training your children to a routine. I love the color coordinated binders, folders. This, I used a bookshelf. I had more bookshelves at this time. But for the most of my years, I used the tower of drawers because the space I had was minimal. I could take out the labels. Here's a couple of different years here. They're different labeled, different subjects, different years. I could go up and down for the number of drawers. And it was just one of my staples. It's something that truly worked through all the years because I didn't have to purchase bookshelves. If you have bookshelves and you haven't purchased, then think about a binder type of system. And these also can be used when they were younger. I also used them just to stick their paper in and put it away for the day because they couldn't open the binder. They didn't know anything about the folders. They were quite young, but they could open the drawer and stick their stuff in. So I use the drawers as well for putting their paper clutter away. Okay, you have any questions, be sure and post them on the group. I'm excited to answer them for you.